Hello. Welcome. Nice to see the true music documentary fans here tonight. Thanks so much for coming. It's been such a gut punch of a week. But we really appreciate your support for this series, and the Westdale really appreciates having you here too. So thank you for coming out. So my name is Alicia Main. I am a DJ, host of a Hamilton Film podcast where I document what's happening in the local film industry. And I'm also a music supervisor, so I'm in charge of helping producers, directors license music and choose music for their films. So that's kind of a little bit of the background as to why I've been chosen to host these music and film nights here. I just want to thank our sponsor, the Take Note Stationery Boutique, which is located right here in the Westdale Village. If you're looking for any last-minute Christmas shopping options, they have a great range of local and Canadian-made goodies. So who's seeing this film for the first time? Pretty much everyone. Wow, that's so exciting. This is my first time seeing it in the theater and the big screen. So it kind of feels like it's the first time when you get that opportunity. And when I was curating this series, we've done 3 so far. 2. This is the 3rd. So we did Give Me Shelter, the Rolling Stones documentary, and we did one called Festival Express, which was about the 1970 Canadian train ride across Canada, the festival. I've been choosing films that you don't get to see very often on the big screen. So that was, it's just a really special opportunity to be able to present something like this. So this film was originally released in theaters in 1981. It was reissued in 2016. Directed by James Zalapsky, it was shot in 16 millimeter film. In the cinema verite style, or the direct cinema style of documentary, which is similar to if you were here for Gimme Shelter, you're going to see a lot of similarities with that. It just means that the filmmakers are recording the events as they're happening without, narration, interviews, reconstructions, that sort of thing. So somebody mentioned they were here for the Anne Murray documentary last Wednesday. So it's a very different style to that. It's really just kind of a lot of scenes that it doesn't really follow like a typical kind of narrative. It's more like fly on the wall, looking at things unfolding. But what really makes it special is just some of the careers then that took off after this. So we're seeing, Steve Earle, Rodney Crowell, the first known recordings of them ever. Townes Van Sant went on to be a really a big star kind of almost after his death, as has definitely been significant for in the Americana songwriters world. So that's just what makes this kind of extra special these days. So it was filmed in the last weeks of 1975 and into 1976. So I like to kind of start these talks by immersing ourselves in the world in that time, just so we get a better feel of what was culturally impacting North America. So look at the year of 1975. I think all of our film talks so far, the Prime Minister of Canada is Pierre Trudeau, because he had been for a really long time. You're lucky since 1968, and then he had another run in the 80s. It's probably the longest serving Canadian Prime Minister. President Gerald Ford was the United States president. It was interesting to know that that year, 1975, he survived not 1 but 2 assassination attempts, both in September. So you can imagine, I don't know how his Secret Service couldn't stop the second one after. You'd think they'd be on a lot high alert after the first, but both were in California. The first was Lynette Squeaky Fromm and then Sarah Jane Moore, both unsuccessful assassination attempts. The Best Picture Oscar winner that year was The Godfather Part 2. One of the biggest films of the year was Jaws. That really kind of took a new kind of turn for the blockbuster summer hits. That was kind of really culturally significant. Wheel of Fortune and Saturday Night Live both premiered that year on NBC. The Watergate scandal was dominating the news early in the year. There were some convictions and some fallout from that. The first International Women's Day was that year, March 8th. It was 1975 was also the year that Microsoft company was founded. And it was the year that the Vietnam War finally ended in April of that year. And also just kind of in musical history related, news, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sinks in a storm near the entrance of Lake Superior, killing all 29 crew members and becoming immortalized in the Gordon Lightfoot song. Some other chart toppers that year, if you're listening to radio, you would have been hearing lots of Elton John, Barry Manilow, Earth, Wind and Fire, the Paul McCartney and Wings, Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles. So that like kind of West Coast country music was very popular. Also a lot of pop, like Olivia Newton-John, the Carpenters. The number one song that year was Love Will Keep Us Together by Captain Antonio. And the number two song was Rhinestone Cowboy by Glenn Gamble, which you will probably be reminded of when you see David Allan Coe's very flashy rhinestone suit in this film. So afterwards, we'll talk a little bit more about what we just watched. I'll give you an opportunity to make some comments or ask questions, but thank you and enjoy Heartworn Highways. That certainly takes us back to a time and place. Hope you enjoyed that. So, yeah, like I was saying, it's kind of a different style. It's really just showing you a lot of, what they shot in a very specific time in history around, mostly shot in Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee. I said it features the first known recordings of Steve Earle, who was 20 years old at the time, and Rodney Crowell, who was 25. So Steve Earle, he moved to Nashville in 1974, then kind of got sick of that. He was working as a staff songwriter in a publishing company, returned back to Texas, and then moved back to Nashville again in the 80s, released his first full-length album, Guitar Town, in 86, but then had his big success with Copperhead Road in 1988. He is still recording and releasing music to this day. Rodney Crowell, also from Texas, moved to Nashville in 1972. He also worked as a staff songwriter. The song you heard playing in that film of Blueberry Wine was recorded by Emmylou Harris, and then Emmylou subsequently asked Rodney Crowell to join her band, and they were collaborators for many years. And then Rodney Crowell took some time out. In the 80s, he was producing albums by his wife, Rosanne Cash, daughter of Johnny Cash. And in the opening scene, we saw an artist, I don't know if any of you have been familiar with before, Larry John Wilson, who kind of has that really like deep Barry White voice almost. He's worth checking out more of his stuff. I have one of his albums from 1976 called Let Me Sing My Song to You, but he mostly retired after 1980, had occasional tour. He did release an album in 2009 and then died of a stroke in 2010. I had tickets actually to see him when I was living in London, England around 2006, but that tour was canceled because of health issues. So one of the most moving scenes in the film, I'm sure you'd agree, was the one with Uncle Seymour Washington being serenaded by the character Townes Van Sant. So Seymour Washington, actually, he died the following year, 1977, at the age of 80. Townes Van Sant, I mean, I could talk all night about him. He's a phenomenal songwriter and very inspirational to many people. And there is a full documentary on him called Be Here to Love Me, which might make it into this series if it goes on long enough, because I do really love that. He has a very interesting life story. He died on January 1st, New Year's Day, just like Hank Williams did, in 1997 after a long battle with alcoholism. One of the other big characters of the film, David Allan Coe. So his big hit was Take This Job and Shove It, as recorded by Johnny Paycheck. And he spent much of his life, as he hinted at, in reform schools and prison. I think he liked to kind of elevate his story to try to make himself appear more of an outlaw than he actually was. He had lied and said that he was on death row for murdering someone who tried to rape him in prison. That turned out to be a lie. Just take whatever he said as maybe part of his persona, not necessarily the truth. But he was quite a controversial figure in the fringes of the outlaw country movement. And a lot of these guys were kind of on the fringes of, like they're, when you think of big country artists at the time, in Nashville particularly, like Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, and these guys are kind of not reaching that sort of mainstream success, but really writing in a more of a style that adopted more folk and blues, and really going against the kind of Nashville pop kind of sound that was very prevalent at the time. Just another thing about David Allan Coe that's quite interesting is his son, Tyler Mahan Coe, actually has an excellent podcast called Cocaine and Rhinestones, which is covering the history of country music. It's really engaging to listen to. He covers lots of different people. His new series is all about George Jones. So I'd recommend checking that out. So Guy Clarke, who's originally from Texas, he released more than 20 albums. He was a big mentor to Steve Earle and Rodney Crowell. One of his biggest hits was Desperado's Waiting for a Train, which was recorded by the Highwaymen. And he died in 2016. But there is a documentary about him that was just released and is doing the kind of film festival circuit this year called Without Getting Killed or Caught. And I really hope that one gets shown here eventually too. I have been asking about it. We saw Charlie Daniels, the big fiddle player in the high school gymnasium scene. His biggest hit was Devil Went Down to Georgia. And he died last year at the age of 83. And then we saw the film end. That was the Christmas Eve party at Guy and Susannah Clarke's house in Nashville. It's kind of a fitting thing to show. I didn't even think about that when I booked this for the 22nd, that it was going to be around Christmas time. That goes well. Speaking of Susannah Clarke, so one of the things you may notice in this is it really just talks about all the male songwriters around the time. But Susannah Clarke was actually a songwriter as well. You can see her. She was the brunette in that last scene that was hanging around the party. She had a number one songs, I'll Be Your San Antone Rose and Come From the Heart. One of my husband and I favorite artists, Jerry Jeff Walker, recorded several of Susannah Clarke's songs, including We Were Kinda Crazy Then. Susannah died in 2012 and inspired Guy Clarke's 2014 Grammy-winning album, My Favorite Picture of You. And another one that I was looking up to see what other female songwriters were around at that time, and there weren't many that were at least recorded on Google that I looked up. But one that was around at that time, quite young, playing around Austin at the age of 14, was Nancy Griffith, and she had a debut released in 1978, and some of her big songs are Love at the Five and Dime and Speed of the Sound of Loneliness, and which she is written by John Prine, but became a hit for her. And she died August of this year of undisclosed causes. So that's a little bit of a Where Are They Now follow up to this documentary. But I'd love if any of you have any comments, want to share about what you thought, about what you saw. Love to open it up. Yes?
Yeah, that fellow there, Steve Young.
Oh, yeah.
That body of work, he sounded pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, and I know I should have included him in the list. There was a few I didn't include in this Where Are They Now? I don't know much of his stuff, to be honest. I do feel like he does have at least an album or two out. Do you know, Chris?
Yeah, I've seen a few around.
Yeah, my husband Chris there. But that is somebody I don't know where he is these days. I should look him up as well and see what's going on with him.
Nice sound. Nice sound.
Yeah, definitely. There is a microphone going around if you want, and with a sanitizer.
One thing I was struck by tonight in the 1960s and early 70s, I used to listen to radio stations across America, from different cities. But there was a station I picked up out of Dallas. I think it was WFAA. And I remember the music was just so different than anything else that I would hear. And I wonder if there were stations like that were around that were promoting this music.
I would imagine this would, 1975 would still be the time before radio got really syndicated. I would like to believe there were still local stations that would have an impact and would be able to play what they wanted and not have to playlist whatever the national, company told them to. It is quite a valid point, though, because, Texas is such a big state that a lot of artists from there can have a solid career and make good money never leaving the state, so you do get these pockets of people. And that's why something like this documentary is quite important, because it shows that, of course, many of them went on subsequently to have pretty substantial careers, but it just kind of shows like what you might have missed, if you were just following like the charts. Like I was saying, if you were just only listening to the Billboard Top 100, never would have heard any of these people before. So,
I don't know why I remember these things, but there was a station WBAP out of Fort Worth that also, was playing this kind of music, back then. It's such a contrast to today, where it's, as you say, the syndication, it's all the same. And most of it's talk radio now, on AM. But thank you.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of the artists that could have easily been in this story but wasn't, was I mentioned in my notes, Jerry Jeff Walker, because his biggest hit was like Mr. Bojangles. And I believe he played it live on radio before it was even recorded and became like a big hit. Like, what's that song? We want to hear it again. So yeah, it's radio definitely had a bigger impact and regionally than it does now. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And we are planning on continuing this series. It hasn't been announced yet. I feel like they're holding out just to see if we can do it in January or not. But I might as well break the news to you. If we are doing it in January, I have requested the Elvis Presley That's the Way It Is, because I just really wanted to show a fun concert film that we can all just dance in our seats and watch. So hopefully that'll happen. But thank you. And just keep on the Westdale site to find out when we're going to be back. And you can grab some popcorn and beer and takeaway on your way out as well. So thanks very much. Good night.